Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's get started. My name is Simon, and what I'm about to tell you changed the way I view love, marriage, and myself. For years, I thought I was doing everything right, at least enough to keep my marriage together. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I compromised, let things go, and told myself that love meant making sacrifices. But then, one day, I overheard something that shattered every illusion I had. My wife, the woman I shared my life with, said something that made me question whether any of it had ever been real. And that was the moment everything changed. I'm going to take you through exactly what happened, step by step, because if I had noticed the signs earlier, maybe I would have saved myself from years of wasted effort. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about waking up, seeing the truth, and learning when to walk away. To be honest, my marriage to Lillian wasn't something that started with love or even strong attraction. It was arranged. Our aunts were good friends, and they thought we'd make a good match.
I didn't have any strong feelings about it at the time.
I wasn't the type to chase after romance, and Lillian seemed like a decent enough woman. She was quiet, polite, and had a certain elegance that made her seem like she'd be a good wife. So when the family suggested we meet, I went along with it. Our first meeting was awkward, not because Lillian was rude or anything, but because we were two complete strangers sitting across from each other, trying to act like there was something there. She didn't talk much, and I wasn't sure if that was just her personality or if she wasn't interested. But as time went on, we got used to each other. Conversations became easier, and we learned the basics about each other. Our favorite foods, our thoughts on work, and how we viewed life in general. It wasn't some great love story, but it was comfortable. A year later, we got married. It wasn't a grand emotional event, just a traditional wedding with family, friends, and the usual expectations. I won't lie and say it was perfect, but I thought it was fine. We had a routine, we weren't constantly arguing, and I figured that maybe love would grow with time. I had heard that not all marriages start with passion, and that sometimes love is something you build. So, I told myself that as long as we respected each other and worked towards a shared future, things would eventually fall into place. Looking back now, I realize I was lying to myself. One evening, I came home from work exhausted, just wanting to relax. As I walked past the bedroom, I heard Lillian on the phone. At first, I wasn't paying much attention, but then I heard her say, I'd never be with him again. She wasn't angry, just certain, like she had already made up her mind. My chest tightened. At first, I wasn't sure if she was talking about me, but as she kept speaking, it became clear she was. Something inside me just broke. I stood there frozen. She was on the phone, telling her sister that if she had the chance, she'd never be with me again. It wasn't just that she was unhappy. It was the fact that she regretted being with me in the first place. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to walk into the room and ask her directly what she meant. I wanted her to look me in the eye and say it again. But I didn't. Instead, I backed away, careful not to make a sound. I wasn't ready to face whatever truth was waiting for me behind that conversation, so I did nothing. I carried on as if I hadn't heard a thing. But from that moment on, something changed. I started seeing my wife differently. All the little things I had brushed aside before suddenly started making sense. She had always been distant, never really opening up unless I asked her something directly. I used to think she was just reserved, and that with time she'd get comfortable and let me in. But now I was beginning to understand. She had never truly let me in, not even from the start. And it wasn't just emotional distance. I noticed how she complained more than usual and how she seemed irritated by things she used to tolerate. It was like she was slowly pushing me away, piece by piece, and I had been too blind to see it. I didn't say a word to her about what I had overheard. I wanted to, but something held me back. I just wasn't ready to hear it from her directly. So I tried to move past it and buried the whole thing deep inside. I watched her closely in the weeks that followed. Then one evening, everything became clear. I got off work earlier than usual. I didn't call to let Lillian know I was coming home. I never had a reason to. Our apartment wasn't far, and I was looking forward to lying down for a bit before dinner.
Once I stepped inside, I walked straight to the bedroom. And that's when I saw them.
Lillian was in our bed, wrapped up in another man's arms. They were so caught up in each other that they didn't even notice me at first. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. It was like my mind couldn't keep up with reality. Something inside me snapped. I didn't think, I just moved. I lunged at him, my wife's lover, grabbing the first thing I could. I don't even remember when my fist connected with his face. Before he could react, he stumbled back, trying to shield himself. He wasn't expecting a fight. He struggled to free himself, panicking as I hit him again. Then, like a coward, he shoved past me and ran out of the room, grabbing his clothes and bolting through the front door like his life depended on it. I turned to Lillian, expecting, I don't even know what. Fear? Regret? Maybe even an apology.
But no.
Instead of guilt, she was furious at me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed. "You had no right to hit him." I just stood there, breathing hard, my fists still clenched. No right? No right. She had just destroyed our marriage, and she was angry at me for reacting? For once, I didn't argue. I already knew. I took one last look at her, this woman I had tried so hard to love, to make happy, to understand. And then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "You're free to be with him, because this marriage is over." After picking up some of the things I needed for a few days, I walked out of that house without a second look. I checked into a small hotel, because I needed somewhere to be. The room was basic and, more importantly, it was far from her. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. My mind cycled through everything that had led up to this moment. The signs had been there. I had convinced myself things would get better, that she just needed time, that she would see how hard I was trying. But no amount of effort could fix what was never real to begin with. I reached for my phone, not really expecting anything, but I checked anyway. Nothing. No calls, no messages. If I had any lingering doubts about where I stood in her life, they died right there. She wasn't going to fight for this. She wasn't even going to pretend to care that I was gone. That silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. I knew what had to be done. I opened my browser, searched for divorce lawyers, and clicked the first one that had an available appointment. I didn't even look at the price. It didn't matter. I wasn't about to spend another second in a marriage where I was unwanted. The moment the confirmation email came through, I exhaled, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: finality. This was it. I was done. During the divorce process, I remember sitting across from my lawyer, barely listening as he went over the paperwork. My mind was somewhere else. The divorce was moving quickly. Lillian hadn't contested anything, which told me all I needed to know. She wanted out just as much as I did. But in the middle of everything, I found out something that made my stomach turn. The man I had walked in on, the one I swung at in pure rage, wasn't just some random guy. He was her ex. The same ex she once told me was toxic, abusive, and controlling. The same man she claimed she would never go back to. Yet there she was, sneaking around with him behind my back. I couldn't believe how blind I had been. In the beginning, Lillian had painted this guy as a monster. She told me he used to manipulate her, that he never respected her boundaries, and that she was grateful to be in a stable, loving relationship with me. And like a fool, I believed her. I thought I was the safe choice, the man who would treat her right, the one who wouldn't hurt her like he did. But looking back, I started to question everything. If he was so terrible, why did she run back to him the moment she had the chance? Had she ever really left him, or had I just been the backup plan? The guy she settled for when she wanted something comfortable? The truth hit me hard. She never loved me. She probably liked the idea of me, the security, the stability, and the way I bent over backward to make her happy. But love? That was never part of the equation. And the worst part? I had seen the signs. They were right in front of me the whole time. Yet I ignored all of it, convincing myself that love was something that grew over time. I thought if I was patient and tried harder, she'd see how much I cared, and she'd finally love me back. But love doesn't work like that. You don't have to convince someone to love you. You don't have to prove your worth to a person who genuinely wants to be with you. And yet, that's exactly what I had done. I had lowered my standards and accepted less than I deserved just to keep someone who didn't even want to be kept. That realization stung more than the betrayal itself. Because in the end, Lillian wasn't the only one to blame. I had done this to myself. I had chosen to stay blind when the truth was staring me in the face. And that was something I'd never let happen again. When the divorce was finalized, I didn't waste time looking back. I wanted to move on, rebuild, and put everything behind me. Lillian, on the other hand, ran straight into the arms of the man she betrayed me for. She probably thought she had won, that she had traded up, that she had escaped a marriage she never wanted in the first place. I didn't care. She made her choice, and I had already made mine. A few months passed and I started hearing things. Mutual friends told me Lillian wasn't doing as well as she probably expected. At first, I wasn't interested. Her life wasn't my problem anymore. But then, one day, someone casually mentioned that the same man she cheated on me with was now beating her over the smallest issues. I paused. I won't lie, it caught my attention. This was the same woman who had sat across from me, looked me in the eyes, and told me stories about how toxic he was, how he used to yell at her, control her, and make her feel like she was nothing. And now, she had willingly gone back to him. The more I heard, the clearer it became. History was repeating itself. But this time, I wasn't the one trying to fix things. He had her under his thumb, dictating her every move. She couldn't go out when she wanted. She had to explain herself for the smallest things. And when he got angry, he didn't just shout, he hit her. And from what I was told, it was happening often. People expected me to have some kind of reaction, maybe anger, maybe pity. But I felt nothing. No sadness, no sympathy, no satisfaction either. Just nothing. She knew exactly what she was walking into, and she did it anyway. I wasn't her husband anymore, and honestly, I had no interest in whatever storm she had thrown herself into. She made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. Over a year later, life had moved on, and so had I. But then, out of nowhere, a message popped up on my phone. It was Lillian. Hey, I know I don't deserve to ask this, but can we talk? I just stared at it. After everything, she had the nerve to reach out like we were old friends who had lost touch. I didn't respond because I didn't care. But she didn't stop there. Over the next few days, more messages followed. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I was selfish. I took your love for granted. You didn't deserve that. Please, Simon, just say something. I could almost hear her voice as I read her words, but they didn't stir anything in me. She had broken me down piece by making me question my worth. Back then, I would have done anything to make her happy. I had spent so much time thinking if I loved her harder, if I tried more, she'd finally see me. But she never did. And now, she wanted forgiveness. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because her apology meant nothing. It didn't undo the nights I lay awake wondering why I wasn't enough. It didn't erase the image of her in our bed with another man. It didn't fix the damage she had left behind. So I let her words sit there, unanswered, just like she had left my love unappreciated. I've learned something from all of this, and if there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Never settle for a love that isn't reciprocated. I spent so much time trying to be a good husband, trying to make things work, thinking that if I just did a little more, she would appreciate me. But love doesn't work that way. If someone doesn't truly want to be with you, no amount of effort will change that. I ignored the signs, told myself things would get better, and in the end, I was just delaying the inevitable. Pay attention to red flags. I should have known from the beginning. The emotional distance, her lack of effort, the way she never really opened up to me. I convinced myself she just needed time. But deep down, she was never invested. And when people aren't invested, they eventually leave, whether it's physically or emotionally. Looking back, I see now that I was the only one holding on to something that was never real to begin with. If someone doesn't value you, walk away before they destroy you. Staying in a one-sided relationship drains you in ways you don't even realize. You lose yourself trying to make someone else happy, and in the end, they still leave, or worse, they betray you. I spent years thinking I was building something, only to find out she had already checked out. The day I walked away was the day I started to rebuild myself. And trust me, nothing feels better than finally putting yourself first. So, if you're in a situation where you're constantly wondering if your partner truly wants to be with you, don't wait for an answer. Their actions already tell you everything you need to know. Respect yourself enough to leave. That's it for today's story. If you found this relatable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Until next time.